Good day, everyone, and welcome for psychologists and psychometricians board exam. At this point, we will be focusing on theories of personality, and we will have 20 questions for this session. So please prepare paper and pen to answer this drill. But before we start, kung hindi ka pa nakasubscribe sa channel na ito, mag-subscribe na. I-like and i-share mo na rin para mas marami pang makinabang sa mga drills na gagawin natin para sa mga sessions natin. You may pause the video kung nabibilisan ka sa aking pagsasalita para mas mabasa mo yung mga questions na sasagutan mo and answer them at your own pace. Ready ka na ba? Let's start! Theories of personality review questions. Number 1. What convinced Freud of the psychogenic origins of historical symptom? A. His research at the Physiological Institute while a medical student. B. His use of Charcot's hypnotic technique for treating hysteria. C. Brewer's treatment of Anna O by catharsis. Or D. His observations of the neurotic behavior of his brothers and sister. Number 2. What do slip of the tongue and neurotic symptoms have in common? A. Freud discovered them after years of research. B. They directly prove the existence of the id. C. They indirectly prove the existence of the unconscious. Or D. They are the source of dreams. Number 3. An important function of repression is to A. Protect the person against the pain of anxiety. B. Convert superego functions into ego functions. C. Protect the person against public disgrace. Or D. Convert id functions into ego function. Number 4. The id primarily involved in which of the following activities? A. Solving problems in geometry. B. Contemplating the meaning of life. C. Salivating at the sight of food. Or D. Convincing a friend to plant a garden. Number 5. Areas of the body specially capable of producing sexual pleasure are called A. Instinct zones. B. Genital organs. C. Pleasure principal areas. Or D. Erogenous zone. Number 6. An expression of both life and death instinct is A. Narcissism. B. Superego. C. Love. Or D. Masochism. Number 7. Transference is necessary to A. Treat psychosis and other constitutional illness. B. Understand the latent content of dream. C. Prevents the development of neurosis after treatment. Or D. Free libido from neurotic symptom. Number 8. In Jungian psychology, repressed, forgotten, and subliminally perceived experiences of the individual are part of the A. Ego. B. Persona. C. Personal unconscious. D. Collective unconscious. Number 9. The psychic counterpart of instinct is A. Introversion. B. Intuition. C. Extraversion. And D. Archetype. Number 10. Freud's concept of phylogenetic endowment is similar to Jung's idea of A. Ego. B. Personal unconscious. C. Self. Or D. Collective unconscious. Number 11. A man dominated by great mother archetype. A. Enjoys caring for small children. B. Possesses an animus instead of anima. C. Has psychologically immature view of women. Or D. See other males as mothering type. Number 12. The archetype of wisdom and meaning is A. Anima. B. Self. C. Animus. Or D. Old wise man. 13. The ego is divided into objective and subjective aspect during the blank space of childhood. Is it A. Dualistic, B. Anarchic, C. Monarchic, or D. Bimodal? Number 14. Adler's earliest memory concerned A. Comparison with his older, healthier brother, B. An active interest in helping others, C. Neglect by his mother, D. His desire to become a famous psychologist. Number 15. During his general practice as a doctor, Adler A. Treated mental illness with antipsychotic drugs. B. Completely separated physical and mental aspect of illness. C. Developed serious organ inferiority. Or D. Regarded illness as a reflection of the total personality. Number 16. The following are the goals towards which people strive, except A. Fictional, B. Delusional, C. The creation of creative power, or D. Largely unknown to individual. Number 17. Unlike Freud, Adler believed that A. People are basically narcissistic. B. Narcissism is an inherent human characteristic. C. Sublimation is necessary for social interest. Or D. Narcissism is a form of neurosis. Number 18. Adler believed that maladjusted people A. Set their goals too low. B. Set their goals too high. C. Set too many goals. Or D. Set no goals. 19. Which factor does not describe maladjusted people? A. A dogmatic style of life. B. An inflated social interest. C. An exaggerated goal. And D. A private world of experience. And number 20. Adler's concept of moving backward is similar to Freud's concept of A. C. Progression, or D. Regression. And now we go to answers and explanation. Number 1. What of the psychogenic origins of hysterical symptoms? The answer is letter B. His use of Charcot's hypnotic technique for treating hysteria. In 1885, Freud received a traveling grant from the University of Vienna and decided to study in Paris with the famous French neurologist Jean-Martin Charcot. He spent 4 months with Charcot, from whom he learned the hypnotic technique for treating hysteria, a disorder typically characterized by paralysis or improper functions of certain parts of the body. And through hypnosis, Freud became convinced of a psychogenic and sexual origin of hysterical symptom. So yung sinasabi natin dito na hysteria, ito ngayon yung tinatawag natin na FNSD or Functional Neurological Symptom Disorder. Na another term na ginagamit natin ay conversion disorder. Number 2. What do slip of the tongue and neurotic symptom have in common? The answer, letter C. They indirectly prove the existence of the unconscious. Because the unconscious is not available to the conscious mind, how can one, if it really exists, prove it? Freud felt that its existence could be proved only indirectly. To him, the unconscious is the explanation for the meaning behind dreams, slip of the tongue, and certain kinds of forgetting called repression. Number 3. An important function of repression is to answer letter A. Protect the person against the pain of anxiety. Punishment and suppression often create feelings of anxiety, and the anxiety in turn stimulates repression. That is, the forcing of unwanted anxiety ridden experiences into the unconscious as a defense against the pain of anxiety. Next, number 4. The id primarily involves in which of the following activities? The answer, letter C, salivating at the sight of food. The id has no contact with reality, yet it strives constantly to reduce tension by satisfying basic desires. Because its sole function is to seek pleasure, we say that the id serves as the pleasure principle. Number 5. Areas of the body specially capable of producing sexual pleasures are called letter D, erogenous zone. The aim of the sexual drive is pleasure, but this pleasure is not limited to genital satisfaction. Freud believed that the entire body is invested with libido. Beside the genital, the mouth and the anus are specially capable of producing sexual pleasure and are called erogenous zone. So the ultimate aim of sexual drive is to reduce sexual tension. It cannot be changed, but the path by which the aim is reached can be varied. Next number. An expression of both life and death instinct is? The answer is masochism. Masochism, like sadism, is a common need, but it becomes a perversion when eros becomes subservient to the destructive drive. Masochists experience sexual pleasure from suffering pain and humiliation inflicted either by themselves or by others. And because masochists can provide self-inflicted pain, they do not depend on other person for the satisfaction of masochistic needs. In contrast, sadists must seek and find another person on whom to inflict pain or humiliation. In this respect, they are more dependent than masochists on other people. Next. Number 7. Transference is necessary to. The answer? Letter D. Free libido from neurotic symptom. In the first, all the libido is forced from the symptoms into the transference and concentrated there. In the second, the struggle is waged around this new object and the libido is liberated from it. Number 8. In Jungian psychology, repressed, forgotten, or subliminally perceived experiences of the individual are part of the letter C, personal unconscious. The personal unconscious embraces all repressed, forgotten, or subliminally perceived experiences of one particular individual. In contrast, repressed infantile memories and impulses, forgotten events, and experiences originally perceived below the threshold of our consciousness. Number 9. The psychic counterpart of instinct is the archetype, letter D. Archetype should also be distinguished from instinct. Jung defined an instinct as an unconscious physical impulse towards action, and so the archetype as the psychic counterpart to an instinct. Number 10. Freud's concept of phylogenetic endowment is similar to Jung's idea of letter D, collective unconscious. Freud also believed that people collectively inherent predisposition to action. His concept of phylogenetic endowment, however, differs somewhat from Jung's formulation. One difference was that Freud looked first to the personal unconscious. and resorted to the phylogenetic endowment only when individual explanations failed, as he sometimes did when explaining the Oedipus complex. In contrast, Jung placed primary emphasis on the collective unconscious and used personal experiences to round out the total personality. 11. A man dominated by great mother archetype. The answer, letter C, a psychologically immature view of women. Content of the personal unconscious are called complexes. A complex is an emotionally toned conglomeration of associated ideas. For example, a person's experience with mother may become grouped around an emotional core so that the person's mother or even the word mother sparks an emotional response that blocks the smooth flow of thought. Complexes are largely personal, but they may also be partly derived from humanity's collective experience. Number 12, the archetype of wisdom and meaning is the old wise man. The wise old man archetype of wisdom and meaning symbolizes humans' pre existing knowledge of the mysteries of life. The archetypal meaning, however, is unconscious and cannot be directly experienced by a single individual. Politicians and others who speak authoritatively but not authentically often sound sensible and wise to others who are all too willing to be misled by their own wise old man archetype. Number 13. The ego is divided into objective and subjective aspect during the blank phase of childhood. The answer is letter A. The ego, as perceiver, arises during the dualistic phase of childhood, when the ego is divided into the objective and subjective. Children now refer to themselves in the first person and are aware of their existence as separate individuals. Next number. Adler's earliest memory concerned A. Comparison with his older, healthier brother. Adler's poor health was in sharp contrast to the health of his older brother Sigmund. Several of Adler's earliest memories were concerned with the unhappy competition between his brother's good health and his own illness. Sigmund Adler, the childhood rival whom Adler attempted to surpass, remained a worthy opponent, and in latter years he became very successful in business and even helped Alfred financially. By almost any standards, however, Alfred Adler was much more famous than Sigmund Adler. Number 15. During his general practice as doctor, Adler, letter D, regarded illness as a reflection of the totality of personality. Number 16. The following are goals toward which people strive except letter B, delusion. Siyempre, wala naman naghahagad na tao na maging delusional. Number 17. Unlike Freud, Adler believed that letter D, narcissism is a form of neurosis. Number 18. Adler believed that maladjusted people, letter B, set their goals too high. According to Adler, the one factor underlying all types of maladjustment is underdeveloped social interest. Besides lacking social interest, neurotics tend to, number one, set their goals too high. Number two, live in their own private world. And number three, have a rigid and dogmatic style of life. Number 19. Which factor does not describe maladjusted people? The answer, inflated social interest. And number 20. Adler's concept of moving backward is similar to Freud's concept of regression. Moving backward is a tendency to safeguard one's fictional goal of superiority by psychologically reverting to a more secure period of life. Moving backward is similar to Freud's concept of regression in that both involve attempt to return to earlier, more comfortable phases of life, whereas people against anxiety-filled experience or whereas regression takes place unconsciously and protects people against anxiety-filled experience, moving backward may sometimes be conscious and is directed at maintaining at an inflated goal of superiority. Moving backward is designed to elicit sympathy, the deleterious attitude offered so generously to pampered children. And that's the end of our drill for today. I hope meron ka natutunan. Mag-share and mag-subscribe na rin by clicking the subscribe button and hit the notification bell for updates on our drill. Keep safe and have a nice day. Goodbye. Good day and welcome to our review for psychologists and psychometricians word exam. At this point, we will be focusing on theories of personality. We will have 20 questions for this session, so please prepare paper and pen to answer the drill. Ready ka na ba? Let's start! Theories of personality review questions. Number 1. Firstborn children, according to Adler, are likely to A. Suffer from organ inferiorities. B. Communicate in organ dialect more than the second-born children. C. Have intensified feelings of power and superiority. Or D. Have a very little anxiety. Number 2. The most reliable means of revealing style of life is A. The word association test. B. Early recollections. C. Free association. Or D. Hypnosis. Number 3. Sullivan's Zodiac group served as A. An informal discussion group of professionals interested in the social sciences. B. A research group to investigate his interest in astrology. C. A forum for training hospital attendants in the care of schizophrenic. Or D. A source of financial support for his research on treating schizophrenia. Number 4. In Sullivan's theory, tensions are two kinds, needs and blank. A. Meta needs. B. Wants. C. Anxiety. Or D. Tenderness. Number 5. This is characterized by feeling that one is living among one's enemy. A. Malevolent transformation. B. Isolating dynamism. C. Paranoid personification. And D. Schizoid self-system. Number 6. An infant's experiences of the mothering one's punishment and disapproval lead to the development of the blank personification. Is it A. Not me? B. Good me? C. Bad me? Or D. Good mother? Number 7. During childhood, a child may invent playmates. Sullivan called these imaginary playmates as A. sublimation, B, juvenile, C, ghosts, or D, eidetic. Number 8. To Sullivan, a 12-month-old infant boy who enjoys playing with his genitals would be A, satisfying social needs, B, satisfying general needs, C, increasing anxiety, or D, experiencing Oedipus complex. Number 9. Jane is married to an abusive husband but refuses to admit that he has a serious problem. Sullivan would refer to this process as A, dissociation, B, syntactic distortion, C, selective inattention, or D, masochism. Number 10. Horney's theory is built mainly on her writings about A, psychosis and psychotic people, B, neurosis or neurotic people, C, normality and normal people, or D, self-actualizing people. Number 11. Horney believed that people are governed by two guiding principles. Is it A, sex and aggression, B, avoidance and attraction, C, safety and satisfaction, or D, superiority and inferiority? Number 12. Horney sees the tendency to humiliate others in order to protect oneself against humiliation is A, power, B, prestige, C, possession, or D, dominance. Number 13. Jose is constantly belittling his own accomplishment and he dreads asking others for favors. This illustrates Horney's neurotic need A, for affection and approval, B, for a partner, C, to restrict one's life within narrow borders, or D, for self-sufficiency and independence. Number 14. Sally is proud of her intellectual skills and abilities, and she is pleased when others notice and admire her superior intelligence. This reflects Horney's neurotic need for A, affection and approval, B, independence, C, prestige, or D, personal admiration. Number 15. Our capacity to be aware of ourselves as a separate entity from calls the need for A, self-awareness, B, a sense of identity, C, transcendence, or D, a frame of orientation. Number 16. According to Fromm, to keep from going insane, one's frame of orientation must include A, consistent information, B, inconsistent information, C, a final goal, or D, a simple structure. Number 17. Fromm asserted that historically, as people gained more economic and political freedom, they felt more A, isolation, B, dominance, C, transcendence, or D, malignant aggression. Number 18. Ariel is careful with his money and rarely shares her thoughts or emotions with others. His behavior illustrates Fromm's blank orientation. Is it A, marketing, B, hoarding, C, receptive, or D, exploitative? Number 19. Fromm uses the term necrophilia to refer to A, sexual perversion with a corpse, B, sexual perversion with feces, C, an irrational desire to die, and D, any attraction to death. And number 20, Fromm regarded Adolf Hitler as the world's most famous conspicuous example of a person suffering from A, psychosis, B, moral hypochondriasis, C, existential dilemma, or D, the syndrome of decay. And now for answers and explanation. Number 1. Firstborn children, according to Adler, are likely to. The answer is letter C. Have intensified feelings of power and superiority. Firstborn children, according to Adler, are likely to have intensified feelings of power and superiority, high anxiety, and overprotective tendency. Firstborn children occupy a unique position, being an only child for a time and then experiencing a traumatic dethronement when a younger sibling is born. This event dramatically changes the situation and the child's view of the world. Number 2, the most reliable means of revealing style of life is. The answer? Letter B, early recollection. Adlerian therapy uses birth order, early recollection, and dreams to foster courage, self-esteem, and social interest. Next, number 3. Sullivan Zodiac Group serve as. The answer is letter A, an informal discussion group of professionals interested in the social sciences. On a more positive note, Sullivan has his residence in New York and brought him in contact with several psychiatrists and social scientists, among which are Karen Horney, Erich Fromm, Frida Fromm Richman, Clara Thompson, and others. And these are called the Zodiac Group. Number 4. In Sullivan's theory, tensions are two kinds, needs and the answer is anxiety. Sullivan recognized two types of tension. These are needs and anxiety. Needs usually result in productive action, whereas anxiety leads to non-productive or disintegrative behavior. Number 5. This is characterized by the feeling that one is living among one's enemies. The answer is letter A, malevolent transformation. Malevolence is the disjunctive dynamism of evil and hatred, characterized by the feelings of living among one's enemy. Next number. An infant's experiences of the mothering one's punishment and disapproval lead to development of the blank personification. The answer, letter C, bad me. The bad me personification is fashioned from experiences of punishment and disapproval that infants receive from their mothering one. The resulting anxiety is strong enough to teach infants that they are bad, but it is not so severe as to cause the experience to be dissociated or selectively inattended. Number 7. During childhood, a child may invent playmates. Sullivan called these imaginary playmates as letter D, eidetic. Because not all interpersonal relationship with real people. Some are eidetic personification. That is, unrealistic traits or imaginary friends that many children invent in order to protect their self-esteem. Number 8. To Sullivan, a 12-month-old infant boy who enjoys playing with his genitals would be letter A, satisfying a zonal need. The mouth satisfies general needs by taking in food and oxygen, but it also satisfies the zonal need for oral activity. Number 9. Jane is married to an abusive husband but refuses to admit that he has a serious problem. Sullivan would refer to this process as letter C, selective inattention. Selective inattention is a refusal to see those things that we do not wish to see. Number 10. Horney's theory is built mainly on her writings about letter B, neurosis and neurotic people. Horney's writings are concerned mostly with neurotic personality. Many of her ideas can also be applied to normal individuals. Number 11, Horney believed that people are governed by the two guiding principles, and these are letter C, safety and satisfaction. Children need to experience both genuine love and healthy discipline. Such conditions provide them with feelings of safety and satisfaction and permit them to grow in accordance with their real self. Number 12. Horney sees the tendency to humiliate others in order to protect oneself against humiliation as letter B, prestige. Neurotic may also try to protect themselves by striving for power, prestige, or possession. Prestige is a protection against humiliation and is expressed as tendency to humiliate others. Number 13. Jose is constantly belittling his own accomplishment and he dreads asking others for favors. This illustrates Horney's neurotic need. Letter C, to restrict one's life within the narrow borders. The neurotic need to restrict one's life within the narrow borders strives to remain inconspicuous, to take second place, and to be content with very little. They downgrade their own abilities and dread making demands on others. Number 14. Sally is proud of her intellectual skills and abilities, and he is pleased with others notice and admire her superior intelligence. This reflects Horney's erotic need for B. Personal admiration. And the neurotic need for personal admiration have a need to be admired for what they are rather than for what they possess. Their inflated self-esteem must be continually fed by the admiration and approval of others. Number 15, our capacity to be aware of ourselves as a separate entity from cause this need for letter B, and a sense of identity. And that is the fourth human need, a sense of identity, or the capacity to be aware of ourselves as a separate entity. Number 16, according to Fromm, to keep from going insane, one's frame of mind orientation must include letter C, a final goal. A roadmap without a goal or destination is worthless. Humans have the mental capacity to imagine many alternative paths to follow. To keep from going insane, however, they need a final goal or object of devotion. Number 17. Fromm asserted that historically, as people gained more economic and political freedom, they felt more A. Isolation. Number 18. Ariel is careful with his money and rarely shares his thought or emotion with others. His behavior illustrates Fromm's orientation. The answer? Hoarding. Yan. So rather than valuing things outside themselves, hoarding characters seek to save that which they have already obtained. Number 19. Fromm uses the term necrophilia to refer to letter D, any attraction to death. The term necrophilia means love of death and usually referred to as sexual perversion in which a person desires sexual contact with a corpse. However, Fromm used necrophilia in a more generalized sense to denote any attraction to death. Necrophilia is an alternative character orientation to biophilia. And the last number, Fromm regarded Adolf Hitler as the world's most conspicuous example of a person suffering from the syndrome of decay. Yan. Fromm regarded Hitler as the world's most conspicuous example of a person with the syndrome of decay, possessing a combination of necrophilia, malignant narcissism, and incestuous symbiosis. Hitler displayed all three pathological disorders. He was attracted to death and destruction, narrowly focused on self-interest and driven by an incestuous devotion to the Germanic race, being fanatically dedicated to prevent its blood from being polluted by Jews and the other non-Aryans. And that's the end of our drill for today. I hope may natutunan ka. Mag-share and mag-subscribe na rin by clicking the subscribe button and hit the notification bell for updates on our drill. Keep safe and have a nice day. Magandang araw mga kasaik and welcome to our Psychologist and Psychometricians Review for Board Exam. Oh, ready ka na ba? Let's start. Theories of Personality Review Questions. Number 1. Klein extended Freud's psychoanalysis with her emphasis on A. Adolescence, B. Young adult, C. Old age, or D. Very early infancy. Number 2. Klein believed that children introject their mother into their psychic structure. This means that A. They believe that they are inside their mother. B. They believe that their mother is inside their own body. Letter C. They reject their mother's authority. Or letter D. They adopt their mother's standards of morality. Number 3. In contrast to Freud, Klein believed that the superego, A. emerged much later. B. Grew out of Oedipus complex. C. Preceded the development of the ego. And D. Is much more harsh and cruel. Number 4. Mahler believed that when infants realize that they cannot satisfy their own basic needs, they A. Reject those needs and introject a new set of learned needs. B. Become autistic. C. They seek a symbiotic relationship with their mother. Or D. They merge their ego with their superego. Number 5. Mahler held that children begin to develop feelings of personal identity during this development stage. Is it A. Normal symbiosis, B. Separation individuation, C. Normal autism, or D. Pre-adolescence? Number 6. Kahoot's narcissistic need included the need A. To exhibit the grandiose self-idealized parent image. B. To be the first in the eyes of one's parents. C. To acquire a sense of self-identity. Or D. For power and authority. Number 7. To Dollard and Miller, the essence of learning is A. Punishment received for correct response. B. Strengthening the cue-response connection. C. Weakening of cue-response connection. D. Any event which increases the strength of the drive. Number 8. Difference among cultures and individuals can be accounted for by blank drive. Is it A. Innate, B. Primary, C. Learned, or D. None of this? Number 9. Dollard and Miller believe our most beneficial cultural heritage is A. Marriage, B. Courtship, C. Childcare, or D. Language. Number 10. According to Dollard and Miller, abnormality is learned through A. Conflict, B. Repression, C. Reinforcement, or D. All of the choices. Number 11. Which of the following description would best describe B.F. Skinner? Is it A, determinist, B, environmentalist, C, cognitive psychologist, or D, radical behaviorist? Number 12. To Skinner, the effects of punishment are A, the same effect with rewards. B, the exact opposite of those of reward. C, more predictable than reward. Or D, less predictable than reward. Number 13. The following are effects of punishment except A, suppression of related behavior. B, suppression of behavior punished. C, conditioning of negative behavior. Or D, shaping of the targeted behavior. Number 14. Which of the following is most clearly an example of a conditioned reinforcement? Is it A, physical comfort, B, food, C, money, D, sleep? Number 15. Which is considered by Skinner as the most inefficient schedule of reinforcement? Is it A, continuous, B, intermittent, C, ratio, or D, interval? Number 16. Which schedule of reinforcement illustrates playing slot machine? Is it A, fixed ratio, B, variable ratio, C, fixed interval, D, variable interval? 17. By monthly salaries are reinforcement working on which schedule of reinforcement? Is it A, fixed ratio, B, variable ratio, C, fixed interval, or D, variable interval? Number 18. Which is the first requirement for self-regulation? Is it A, self-system, B, self-observation, C, free will, or D, modeling? Number 19. When a person compares his test scores to others to determine his performance, that person is using which judgment process? Is it A, personal standard, B, positive reinforcement, C, performance attribution, or D, values classification? 20. When would self-efficacy most likely to increase? Is it A, after failing at a task, B, when effort falls short success, B, after successfully performing a difficult task, or D, when not determined to succeed? And now we go to answers and explanation. Number 1. Klein extended Freud's psychoanalysis with her emphasis on. The answer is letter D, very early infancy. The object relations theory of Melanie Klein was built on careful observation of young children, in contrast to Freud, who emphasized the first 4 to 6 years of life. Klein stressed the importance of the first 4 to 6 months after birth. She insisted that the infant's drive, like hunger, sex, and so forth, are directed to an object, a breast, a penis, a vagina, and so on. And according to Klein, the child's relation to the breast is fundamental and serves as a prototype for later relations to whole objects such as mother and father. Number 2, Klein believed that children introject their mother into their psychic structure. This means that they, letter B, believe that their mother is inside their own body. Introjected objects are not accurate representation of the real objects, but are colored by children's fantasy. For example, infants will fantasize that their mother is constantly present. That is, they feel that their mother is always inside their body. The real mother, of course, is not perpetually present, but infants nevertheless devour her in fantasy so that she becomes a constant internal object. Number 3, In contrast to Freud, Klein believed that the superego, the answer is D, is much more harsh and cruel. Klein's picture of the superego differs from Freud's in at least three important respects. First, it emerges much earlier in life. Second, it is not an outgrowth of an Oedipus complex. And third, it is much harsher and crueler. Next, number 4. Mahler believed that when infants realize that they cannot satisfy their own basic needs, the answer is letter C. Seek a symbiotic relationship with their mother. As infants gradually realize that they cannot satisfy their own needs, they begin to recognize their primary caregiver and to seek a symbiotic relationship with her, a condition that leads to normal symbiosis, the second developmental stage of Mahler's theory. Number 5, Mahler held that children begin to develop feelings of personal identity during this developmental stage. The answer is letter B, separation, individuation. The third major developmental stage, separation, individuation, spans the period from about 4th or 5th month of age until about the 30th or 36th month. During this time, children become psychologically separated from their mother, achieve a sense of individuation, and begin to develop feelings of personal identity. Number 6, Kahoot's narcissistic needs include the need, letter A, to exhibit the grandiose self-idealized parent image. Cahoots believe that infants are naturally narcissistic. They are self-centered, looking out exclusively for their own welfare, and wishing to be admired for those for who they are and for what they do. The early selves become crystallized around two basic narcissistic needs: the need to exhibit the grandiose self and the need to acquire an idealized image of one or both parents. Number 7, Dollard and Miller. The essence of learning is letter B, strengthening the cue response connection. Number 8, difference among culture and individuals can be accounted for by, the answer is letter C, learn, drive. Dollard and Miller believe our most beneficial cultural heritage is, the answer is letter D, language. Number 10, according to Dollard and Miller, abnormality is learned through, the answer is all of the choices. It is learned through conflict, repression, and reinforcement. Number 11, which of the following description would least describe B.F. Skinner? Is it A, determinist? No. The answer is letter C, cognitive psychologist. Skinner can rightfully be regarded as a determinist and environmentalist. Skinner's strict adherence to observable behavior earned his approach the label radical behaviorism, a doctrine that avoids all hypothetical constructs such as ego, traits, drives, needs, hunger, and so forth. Number 12. To Skinner, the effects of punishment are, the answer, letter D, less predictable than rewards. Skinner agreed with Thorndike that the effects of punishment are less predictable than those of reward. 13. The following are effects of punishment except letter D, shaping of the targeted behavior. Number 14. Which of the following is most clearly an example of a conditioned reinforcement? The answer is letter C, money. 15. Which is considered by Skinner as the most inefficient schedule of reinforcement? The answer is letter A, continuous. With continuous schedule, the organism is reinforced for every response. This type of schedule increases the frequency of a response but is an inefficient use of the reinforcer. Skinner preferred intermittent schedule, not only because they make more efficient use of the reinforcer, but because they produce responses that are more resistant to extinction. Number 16, which schedule of reinforcement illustrates playing a slot machine? The answer, letter B, variable ratio. 17, by monthly salaries are reinforcement working in schedule of reinforcement? The answer is letter C, fixed interval. 18, which is the first requirement of self-regulation? The answer, letter B, self-observation. External factors interact with internal or personal factors in self-regulation. Bandura recognized three internal requirements in the ongoing exercise of self-influence. Number one, self-observation. Number two, judgmental processes. And number three, self-reaction. Next, number 19. When a person compares his test score to others to determine his performance, that person is using which judgment process? The answer, performance attribution. Self-regulation also depends on how we judge the cause of our behavior. That is performance attribution. If we believe that our success is due to our own efforts, we will take pride in our accomplishment and tend to work harder to attain our goals. However, if we attribute our performance to external factors, we will not derive as much self-satisfaction and will probably not put forth strenuous effort to attain our goals. And last, number 20, when would self-efficacy most likely to increase? The answer is letter C, after successfully performing a difficult task. Successful performance raises self-efficacy in proportion to the difficulty of the task. Highly skilled tennis players gain little self-efficacy by defeating clearly inferior opponents, but they gain much by performing well against superior opponents. And that's the end of our drill for today. I hope marami kang natutunan. Mag-share and mag-subscribe na rin. At click mo na rin yung notification bell para every time na may i-upload tayong bagong video, mabibigyan ka ng notification. So keep safe and have a nice day. Magandang araw mga kasayek and welcome to our review for Psychologists and Psychometricians Board Exam. Part 4 na tayo ng Theories of Personality. And katulad ng dati, we will have 20 questions and please prepare your paper and pen. Ready ka na ba? Let's start. Theories of Personality review questions. Number 1. According to Bandura, when is it likely that apathy, resignation, and helplessness develop? Is it A, low efficacy, high expectations? B, low efficacy, unresponsive environment? B, high self-efficacy, responsive environment? Or D, high self-efficacy, unresponsive environment? Number 2, what belief does Bandura has different from Dollard and Miller and Skinner? Is it A, modeling is a form of imitation? B, stimuli cannot have reinforcement value? C, cognitive processes are important? Or D, reinforcement is not a necessary condition? Number 3, a person who minimizes her previous accomplishment and exaggerates her past mistakes. For Bandura, this illustrates A, self-reaction, B, self-observation, C, self-consciousness, and D. Judgment process. Number 4. Systematic desensitization is a technique that involves the following except A. Extinction of anxiety. B. Therapy-induced relaxation. C. Fear extinction through self. Or D. Therapy-induced defense. Number 4. Rother assumes that A. Motivation is directed toward the goal. B. People are primarily motivated to reduce tension. C. Motivation stems from the environment. Or D. People are motivated only by internal needs. Number 6. According to Rother, if expectancy is held constant and reinforcement value varies, then it is possible to predict A. The psychological situation. B. Interpersonal potential. C. Behavioral potential. Or D. The need value. Number 7. Rother sees needs as A. A state of deprivation. B. An indicator of direct behavior. C. A condition of arousal. Or D. Social and physiological category. Number 8. According to Michel, behavior is determined by A. The interaction of person variables with situational variables. B. Environmental contingencies. C. Relatively permanent disposition. D. Interaction between need potential and freedom of movement. Number 9. Correlations of scores with factors are called A. Factor loading. B. Factor theories. C. Trait theories. Or D. Superfactors. Number 10. Which correlation technique has been used by Cattell to measure unique traits? Is characteristics within the individual? Is it A. The P technique? B. The R technique? C. Q technique? Or D. D technique? 11. Cattell has attempted to measure human personality from three directions using L data, Q data, and T data. Which of these would be an example of T data? Is it A, an aptitude test scores, B, an autobiography, C, a biography, or D, supervisory ratings? 12. Extroverted types are characterized by all of this, except A, sociability, B, liveliness, C, jocularity, or D, thoughtfulness. Number 13. Introverted types are characterized by all except A, quiet, B, passive, C, optimistic, or D, sober. Number 14. Allport viewed personality as A closed system, B, an open system, C, learned, or D, inherited. Number 15. Allport saw people as being motivated mostly by, is it A, the need to reduce tension, B, cultural influences, C, unconscious forces, D, a variety of motives. Number 16. Allport's theory of personality is based mostly on A, clinical experience, B, factor analytic studies, C, experimental investigation, D, philosophical speculation. 17. Which of the following is most likely based on perseverative, functionally autonomous motives? Is it A, regression to an infantile stage of development? B, contraction of the pupil of the eye? C, addiction to nicotine? Or D, watching one's favorite TV program? Number 18. Kelly calls the meaning or interpretation people place on events as A, construct, B, alternative, C, postulate, or D, Corollaries. 19. Frank and Joe are tall. Jeff is fat. These statements illustrates the incorrect use of a construct because construct A only points to similarities. B only emphasize difference. C involve only one dimension. D must be multidimensional comparison. 20. Kelly's insistence that a construct is an either or a proposition is reflected in this corollary. Is it A, dualistic, B, bimodal, C, symmetry, or D, dichotomy? And let's now proceed to answers and explanation. Number 1, according to Bandura, when is it likely that apathy, resignation, and helplessness develop? The answer, it's letter B, low self-efficacy and responsive environment. High and low efficacy combined with responsive and unresponsive environments to produce 4 possible predictive variables. When efficacy is high and the environment is responsive, outcomes are more likely to be successful. When low efficacy is combined with responsive environment, people may become depressed when they observe that others are successful at tasks that seem to be difficult for them. When people with high efficacy encounter unresponsive environmental situation, they usually intensify their efforts to change the environment. They may use protest, social activism, or even force to instigate change. But if all efforts fail, Bandura hypothesized either they will give up the course and take on a new, or they will seek a more responsive environment. And finally, when low self-efficacy combines with an unresponsive environment, people are likely to feel apathy, resignation, and helplessness. Number 2, what belief does Bandura has different from Dollard, Miller, and Skinner? The answer is letter B. Reinforcement is not a necessary condition. Number 3, a person who minimizes her previous accomplishment and exaggerates her past mistakes. For Bandura, this illustrates letter B, self-observation. During self-observation, people can misjudge their own performance or distort their memory of past accomplishment. Depressed people tend to exaggerate their past mistakes and minimize their prior accomplishments, a tendency that perpetuates their depression. Number 4, systematic desensitization is a technique that involves the following except. The answer is letter D, therapy-induced defense. Patients typically begin by observing models or by having their emotional arousal lesser through systematic desensitization, which involves extinction of anxiety or fear through self-induced or therapy-induced relaxation. With systematic desensitization, the therapist and patient work together to place fearsome situation on a hierarchy from least to most threatening. Number 5, Rother assumed that its letter A, motivation is directed toward a goal. Rother's fourth basic hypothesis is that motivation is goal-oriented. He rejects the notion that people are primarily motivated to reduce tension or seek pleasure, insisting that the best explanation for human behavior lies in people's expectation that their behavior are advancing towards a goal. Number 6, according to Rother, if expectancy is self-constant and reinforcement value varies, then it's possible to predict its letter C, behavioral potential. Broadly considered, behavioral potential or BP is the possibility that a particular response will occur at a given time and place. Several behavior potentials of varying strengths exist in any psychological situation. 7, Rother sees needs as letter B, an indicator of the direct behavior. Rother defined needs as a behavior or sets of behaviors that people see as moving them in a direction of a goal. Needs are not states of deprivation or arousal, but indicators of the direction of behavior. Number 8, according to Michel, behavior is determined by, yes, it's letter A, the interaction of person variables with situational variables. Michel proposed a set of 5 overlapping relatively stable person variables that interact with the situation to determine behavior. These person variables shifted the emphasis from what a person has to what a person does in a particular situation. What a person does includes more than action. It includes cognitive and affective qualities such as thinking, planning, feeling, and evaluating. Number 9, correlations of scores with factors are called letter A, factor loading. The extent to which each individual scores contributes to the various factors, correlation of scores with factors are called factor loading. Number 10, which correlation variable has been used by Cattell to measure unique traits is characteristic with the individual? The answer, it's letter A, P technique. Cattell has attempted to measure human personality from 3 directions using the L data, Q data, and T data. Which of this would be an example of a T data? The answer, it's letter A, aptitude scores. Cattell used 3 different media observations to examine people from so many angles as possible. The 3 sources of data included person's life record or the L data derived from observations made by other people. Self-reports or Q data obtained from questionnaires and other techniques designed to allow people to make subjective make subjective descriptions of themselves. And objective test or T data, which measures performance such as intelligence, speed of responding, and other such activities designed to challenge people's maximum performance. Number 12, extroverted types are characterized by all except the answer is letter D, thoughtfulness. Extroverts are characterized by sociability and impulsiveness. Introverts by passivity and thoughtfulness. Number 13, introverted types are characterized by all except its letter C, optimistic. Number 14, Allport viewed personality as letter B, an open system. Number 15, Allport saw people as being motivated mostly by, the answer is letter D, a variety of motives. It will be a pluralistic theory allowing for motives of many types. On this point, Allport was critical of Freud and has stood instinct theory, Adler and the single striving for success, and all theories that emphasizes self-actualization as ultimate motive. Allport was emphatically opposed to reducing all human motivation to one master drive. In addition, some motivations are conscious, others unconscious, some are transient, others recurring, some are peripheral, and others appropriate, and some are tension reducing, others tension maintaining. Motives that appear to be different really are different not only in form but also in substance. Number 16. Alport's theory of personality is mostly based on letter D, philosophical speculation. Allport bases theory of personality on philosophical speculation and common sense than on scientific investigation. 17. Which of the following is most likely based on preservative, functionally autonomous motive? The answer is addiction to nicotine. Alport listed other examples of preservative functional autonomy that involve human rather than animal motivation. The first is an addiction to alcohol, tobacco, or other drugs when there is no physiological hunger for them. Alcoholics continue to drink although their current motivation is functionally independent from their original motive. 18. Kelly calls the meaning of or interpretation people place on events as letter A, construct. According to Kelly, all people, including those who build personality theories, anticipate events by the meanings or interpretation they place on those events. These meanings or interpretations are called constructs. 19. Frank and Joe are tall. Jeff is fat. The statements illustrates the incorrect use of construct because construct is letter C, involve only one dimension. A personal construct is one's way of seeing how things or people are alike and yet different from other things or people. For example, you may see how Ashley and Brenda are alike and how they are different from Carol. The comparison and the contrast must occur within the same context. For example, to say that Ashley and Brenda are attractive and Carol is religious would not constitute personal construct. And for our last number, Kelly's insistence that the construct is an either or proposition is reflected in this corollary. The answer is letter D, dichotomy. If people construe events in dichotomized fashion, then it follows that they have some choice in following alternative courses of action. This is Kelly's choice corollary, paraphrased as follows. People choose for themselves that alternative in a dichotomized construct through which they anticipate the greater possibility for extension and definition of future construct. And that's the end of our drill for today. I hope marami ka pa rin natutunan. Mag-share and mag-subscribe na rin by clicking the subscribe button and hit the notification bell para sa mga updates natin sa mga drills. Keep safe and have a nice day. Magandang araw mga kasayk and welcome to our review for psychologists and psychometricians board exam. We are now on our fifth part of theories of personality and we will have 20 questions for this session. Ready ka na ba? Let's start! Theories of personality review questions. Number 1. Kelly stated that people belong to the same cultural group because they A. behave in a similar manner, B. chooses to do so, C. construe their experience in the same way, or D. bound by time and geography. Number 2. The awareness of an immediate and basic change to our core structure is Kelly's definition of: is it A, anxiety, B, threat, C, fear, or D, guilt? Number three, Rogers labeled all those aspects of one's being and one's experience that are perceived in awareness by individual as A, self-concept, B, ideal self, C, real self, or D, imaginary self. Number four, incongruence for Rogers can be seen in terms of A, a lack of empathy, B, a discrepancy between self-concept and ideal self, C, an inability to actualize the formative tendency, or D, a minimal level of external evaluation and reinforcement. Number five, Rogers believed that positive self-regard is A, can exist independently of other people's attitude towards you. B, depends on people's continued positive attitude. C, depends on others' continued negative attitude. Or D, is pathological. Number six, when a person perceives evaluation from another person, Rogers believed that he or she will A, deny the evaluation, B, experience conditions of worth, C, learn something of value from the experience, or D, develop unconditional positive regard for that person. Number seven, if Maslow is the father of third force in psychology, then the first two forces would be A, Jung and Freud, B, Freud and Adler, C, behaviorism and psychoanalysis, or D, psychoanalysis and existentialism. Number 8. Maslow criticized the first two forces in psychology for their A, overemphasis on unconscious motivation, B, inability to successfully treat neurosis, C, unscientific viewpoints on personality, or D, limited view of humanity. Number 9. Maslow's feeling toward his mother were characterized by A, hatred and animosity, B, affection and respect, C, a clinging dependency, or D, indifference. Number 9. Maslow adopted this approach to motivation: A, dualistic, B, homeostatic, C, deterministic, or D, holistic. Number 11. Which of these is not an assumption underlying Maslow's theory of motivation? Is it A, people are continually motivated by one or another? B, unconscious forces lie behind much surface motivation? C, people in different cultures have different basic needs? Or D, human needs can be arranged on a hierarchy? Number 12. A woman whose physiological needs are inadequately satisfied will be motivated to A, satisfy physiological needs, B, satisfy safety needs, C, satisfy esteem needs, or D, become self-actualizing. Number 13. Safety needs are most likely to be strong motivators for A, hungry people, B, children, C, those having problems making friends, or D, self-actualizing people. Number 14. Safety needs differ from physiological needs in that they A, are the most prepotent set of needs, B, represents B values, C, cannot be overly satiated, or D, are meta-motivated. Number 15. May was influenced by Soren Kierkegaard's view of anxiety as struggle against A, non-being, B, destiny, C, fate, or D, intentionality. Number 16. Most existentialists believe all of the following except? Is it A, existence take precedence over essence? B, non-being takes precedence over being? C, subject and object are one unit and must not split? Or D, people search for some meaning to their lives? Number 17. The essential unity of the person and environment is expressed in German word A, the sign, B, Umwelt, C, Mitwelt, or D, Eigenwelt. Number 18. Drug addiction, alcohol abuse, promiscuous sexual behavior, and other compulsive behaviors can be manifestations of: is it A, non-being, B, destiny, C, fate, or D, intentionality? Number 19. A delight in the presence of other person and an affirmation of his value and development as much as one's own is May's definition of: is it A, love, B, care, C, empathy, or D, intentionality? Number 20. May believes our ultimate destiny is A, love, B, will, C, death, or D, despair. And now, let's go to answers and explanation. Number 1. Kelly stated that people belong to the same cultural group because the answer is letter C. They construe their experience in the same way. Social processes, no, in social processes, people belong to the same cultural group not merely because they behave alike, nor because they expect the same things of others, but especially because they construe their experience in the same way. Number 2, the awareness of an immediate and basic change to our core structure is Kelly's definition of. The answer is letter B, threat. People experience threat when they perceive that the stability of their basic construct is likely to be shaken. Kelly in 1955 defined threat as the awareness of imminent comprehensive change in one's core structure. One can be threatened by either people or events, and something the two cannot be separated. Number 3. Rogers labeled all those aspects of one's being and one's experience that are perceived in awareness by the individual as. The answer is letter A, self-concept. The self-concept include all of those aspects of one's being and one's experience that are perceived in awareness, though not always accurately, by the individual. The self-concept is not identical with the organismic self. Portions of the organismic self may be beyond person's awareness or simply not owned by the person. Number 4, incongruence for Rogers can be seen in terms of. The answer is letter B, a discrepancy between self-concept and ideal self. The ideal self contains all those attributes, usually positive, that people aspire to possess. A wide gap between the ideal self and the self-concept indicates incongruence and unhealthy personality. Psychologically healthy individuals perceive little discrepancy between their self-concept and what they ideally would like to be. Number 5, Rogers believed that positive self-regard, the answer is letter A, can exist independently of other people's attitude towards you. As children or adults become aware of that other person has some measure of regard for them, they begin to value positive regard and devalue negative regard. That is, the person develops a need to be loved, liked, or accepted by another person, a need that Rogers referred to as positive regard. Number 6. When a person perceives evaluation from another person, Rogers believed that he or she will. The answer is letter B, experience conditions of worth. Instead of receiving unconditional positive regard, most people receive conditions of worth. That is, they perceive that their parents, peers, or partners love and accept them only if they meet these people's expectations and approval. A condition of worth arises when the positive regard of significant other is conditional, when the individual feels that in some respect he or she is prized and in others not. Number 7. If Maslow is the father of the third force in psychology, then the first two forces would be, the answer is letter C, behaviorism and psychoanalysis. Yeah. The theories of Maslow, Allport, Rogers, and May, and others are sometimes thought of as the third force in psychology. The first force is psychoanalysis, and the second force is the behaviorism. Number 8. Maslow criticized the first two forces in psychology for their letter D, limited view of humanity. In his mature theory, however, Maslow criticized both psychoanalysis and behaviorism for their limited view of humanity and their inadequate understanding of the psychological healthy individual. Number 9. Maslow's feelings towards his mother were characterized by, the answer is letter A, hatred and animosity. Maslow, perhaps the most lonely and miserable childhood of any person discussed in the theories of personality, spent his unhappy childhood in Brooklyn. Maslow was the oldest of 7 born to Samuel Maslow and Rose Maslow. As a child, his life was filled with intense feelings of shyness, inferiority, and depression. Maslow was not specially close to either parent, but he tolerated his often absent father, a Russian Jewish immigrant who made a living preparing barrels. Towards his mother, however, Maslow felt hatred and deep seated animosity, not only during his childhood but until the day she died, just a couple of years before Maslow's own death. Number 10. Maslow adopted this approach to motivation. The answer is letter D, holistic. Maslow's theory of personality rests on several basic assumptions regarding motivation. First, Maslow in 1970 adopted a holistic approach to motivation. That is, the whole person and not any single part or function is motivated. Number 11. Which of these is not an assumption underlying Maslow's theory of motivation? The answer is letter C. People in different cultures have different basic needs. All people everywhere are motivated by the same basic needs. The manner in which people in different cultures obtain food, build shelters, express friendship, and so forth may vary wildly. But the fundamental needs for food, safety, and friendship are common to the entire species. Number 12. A woman whose physiological needs are inadequately satisfied will be motivated to. The answer is letter A, satisfy physiological needs. Number 13. Safety needs are most likely to be strong motivators for. The answer is letter B, children. In societies not at war, most healthy adults satisfy their safety needs most of the time, thus making this need relatively unimportant. Children, however, are more often motivated by safety needs because they live with such threats such as darkness, animals, strangers, and punishment from parents. Number 14. Safety needs differ from physiological needs in that the answer it's letter C. They cannot be overly satiated. Safety needs differ from physiological needs in that they cannot be overly satiated. People can never be completely protected from meteorites, fires, floods, or dangerous acts of others. Number 15. May was influenced by Soren Kierkegaard's view of anxiety as a struggle against. The answer, non-being. Being in the world necessitates an awareness of self as a living, emerging being. This awareness in turn leads to the dread of not being, that is, non-being or nothingness. Number 16. Most existentialists believe all of the following except letter B. Non-being takes precedence over being. First, existence takes precedence over essence. Existence means to emerge or to become. Essence implies a static, immutable substance. Existence suggests process. Essence refers to a product. Existence is associated with growth and change. Essence signifies stagnation and finality. Second, existentialism opposes the split between subject and object. Third, people search for some meaning to their lives. Fourth, existentialists hold that ultimately each of us is responsible for who we are and what we become. And fifth, existentialists are basically anti-theoretical. Number 17. The essential unity of person and environment is expressed in the German word. The answer is letter A, design. The basic unit of person and environment is expressed in the German word design, meaning to exist there. Hence, design literally means to exist in the world and is generally written as being in the world. The hyphen is the term imply a oneness of subject and object of person and world. 18. Drug addiction, alcohol abuse, promiscuous sexual behavior, and other compulsive behaviors can be manifestations of. The answer is letter A, non-being. That is not only avenue for non-being, but is the most obvious one. Life becomes more vital, more meaningful when we confront the possibility of our death. Number 19. A delight in the presence of other person and an affirmation of his value and development as much as one's own is May's definition of. The answer? Letter A, love. Care is not the same as love, but it is the source of love. To love means to care, to recognize the essential humanity of other person, to have an active regard for that person's development. Number 20. May believes our ultimate destiny is. The answer is letter C, death. May define destiny as the design of the universe speaking through the design of each one of us. Our ultimate destiny is death. But on a lesser scale, our destiny includes other biological properties such as intelligence, gender, size and strength, and genetic predisposition towards certain illnesses. In addition, psychological and cultural factors contribute to our destiny. And that's the end of our drill for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe by clicking the subscribe button and hit the notification bell for updates on our drills. Keep safe and have a nice day.